the overview of Daniel could be put this way. Chapters 2, 4, and 5 talk about some coming world events, because that's what chapter 2, 4, and 5 spoke about. When you get to chapters 7 to 12, it really focuses in now on Israel's part in world events. Now here are the next 6 chapters from 10,000 feet. And we're only going to look at one today, obviously. The first chapter we're going to look at is chapter 7. The beast will be judged by the Son of Man. Now, as soon as you hear the word beast, who are you thinking about? Yeah, you're like Antichrist, Revelation. Hold that thought. We get there. All right. In chapter 8, truth will be thrown to the ground. This is actually talking about what happens in about 165 or 167 BC. We'll talk about that. That's next time. Then, probably the most famous prophecy in the entire Old Testament is in chapter 9 of Daniel. The 70 weeks or the 77s in the coming of the Messiah. Have you guys read this? Have you heard about this? We're going to get into that in a few lessons from now. Then in chapter 10, there's a man that appears to Daniel, a man in linen. We'll get to that. Chapter 11 mostly has some short-term prophecies, but by the time you get to chapter 12, Daniel's actually talking about a physical resurrection, one of the very few places in the Old Testament that talks about it, and the coming rest. What's the coming rest? Who's our rest? Ultimately, Jesus is our coming rest. So, let's start right now here in chapter 7. The beast will be judged by the Son of Man. And we're in chapter 7 of Daniel, but before we get to chapter 7, we actually have to go to Matthew chapter 26, because Jesus is before the high priest, and the high priest is accusing him or questioning him. It's his trial before the high priest, and here is the question that Caiaphas asks Jesus. He said, I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus says, yes, it is as you say, but I say to all of you, in the future, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Almighty One, or the Mighty One, and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, he has spoken blasphemy. Now, Son of Man, what does that mean? Hold the thought, because the Son of Man is the person that Daniel is highlighting in Daniel chapter 7. So you'll see later that as soon as Caiaphas hears him say the Son of Man, Caiaphas knows this guy's claiming to be God, because this is a direct quotation from Daniel chapter 7. Now, where chronologically are we? This is what we've seen so far. You remember when Daniel and his friends came to Babylon and then they denied eating the food? Well, they got to Babylon in 605 BC, maybe about 602 BC. They're denying, Daniel saying, I'm not eating the food or so. Daniel dreams of Nebuchadnezzar's statue. That's chapter 2. That's about 595 BC. Then Daniel interprets the handwriting on the wall for Belshazzar. That is 539 BC. Daniel's thrown into the lion's den 2 years later, 537 BC. That's what we covered last time. And his final vision is 536. So the first 6 chapters of Daniel have been chronological. Now when we get to chapter 7, we're backing up. So chapter 7 is actually happening about 553 BC. 553 BC. So it's 16 years prior to Daniel in the lion's den. Just so you can know chronologically in your head. This is when Daniel has the dream, 553 BC. So let's see what happens in Daniel chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, that would be 553 BC, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying on his bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me were 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. Churning up the great sea. Now the great sea to them was the sea of humanity, which was in chaos. That's what this means. Churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. And these 4 beasts, most scholars believe, correspond to the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had.